In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to Andrew and Jerry Save the World, episode 25. Andrew and Jerry Save Justice Thomas. I'm Andrew Langer.
I'm Jerry Rogers.
And we've got a lot to talk about, and you're going to want to stick out this podcast to the very end, because in addition to talking about all of the issues of the day, Jerry and I are we're not going to settle this debate. In fact, this is going to be I think this is going to be a podcast where we're going to agree on a lot of things. We're going to disagree on others, but you're going to want to stick out to the end, because I had a situation that came up a couple of weeks ago where I talked about couples dating. And Jerry and I have some sharp disagreements about that. So we're going to have that conversation at the
couples
end.
Dating.
Yes. And
you hear Langer's words.
Yes, couples dating.
Very bizarre.
And then I also want to get Jerry's thoughts on this new Baz Luhrmann Elvis movie, because Jerry is the biggest.
Oh, yes. I am torn. I don't know.
All right. Well,
I'm hearing bad things, some bad things, kind of bad things.
We're going to talk about it at the end. I agree with you here, but we got to talk. So today, if you're tuning in, obviously you're tuning in. We're going to be talking about the Supreme Court. We're going to be talking about the January 6th hearings. We're going to be talking about gas prices and what's going on with them. There's just so much going on. And by the way, each of us is going to keep one eye on the Twitter feed and other things, because as we're recording this show, the Supreme Court is going to announce whatever decisions are coming out. We're recording this a little bit before 10 a.m. on Friday, the 24th of June. The Supreme Court announced earlier this week that this was going to be a decision day. There are decisions that are going to be coming out today, and there are going to be decisions coming out on Monday. And before we get to rip from the headlines, Jerry, my suspicion is we are not going to get the Boggs decision, the abortion decision today. What do you think about this?
Well, I think that the reason why we haven't seen it yet is because, and again, speculation, which I hate to do, but I think Chief Justice Roberts has been trying to somehow split the baby, so to speak. And that makes me worried.
No pun intended, by the way. Yeah, I want to be really clear, because I used that phrase yesterday.
But I think Justice Roberts really, in an attempt to protect the court's position and stature, I think he's actually undermining the court.
Oh, 100%. Listen, let's get to that in a minute, though, Jerry. But the fundamental question is, do you think we're going to get a decision on it today? I think it's going to come out on Monday. It'll come out the last day of the term. Do you agree with that?
I think it'll come out on the day when all the justices can get into a secure vehicle and leave this city. Yes. Whether that's today or Monday, I'm not sure.
I think that's Monday. Because, you're right. Because they've got to, absolutely correct, because they're going to offer that decision. If they offered it today, they still have to come back on Monday for the opinions on Monday. It's
a bloody shame, too, because, you have all of these very radical, violent, leftist, pro-abortion groups, Jane's Revenge and other groups that have threatened a day of rage, a night of rage. What does that hearken to? Think about that for a second.
To me, it harkens to the night of the to Kristallnacht.
Right, exactly right. There were reports yesterday that the the Department of Homeland went to various Christian-based pregnancy centers, telling them, you better be ready for this.
Yeah.
Like you better be ready for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Eat your Wheaties.
And again, it goes to the broader point that you raised in the opening segment, and that is we have a politicized Department of Justice. We have the left has politicized everything. Andrew, I'm going to ask you this question.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about the Supreme Court. You see legal scholars, attorneys, constitutional professors talking about how the Supreme Court is not reacting to the will of the people. And this worries me, this idea that the Supreme Court is supposed to react to the will of the people.
And I saw somebody write on social media that the Supreme Court itself doesn't reflect the demographics of the nation, and
it's
therefore
insane.
But that person who wrote that was not a legal scholar. Tell you what, Jerry, because we're going to get into this and because we have so much going on, let's immediately go to ripped from the headlines.
Ripped from the headlines.
So yeah, I mean, you raise that point. I mean, especially right when we think about the decisions that came down this week, the Brewer decision, especially yesterday, which the left fell all over itself regarding. This was the New York State right to carry case. A decision written by Justice Thomas, which is why
in an unprecedented move, the Department of Justice issued a statement saying that it respectfully disagrees with the court's decision. Well, that has never happened before.
And disagrees with the decision that when you read the statement that the Justice Department wrote, it's very clear that they are misrepresenting what the decision actually said.
And that's true because all the commentary I've seen on this thus far misinterprets or purposefully misaligns the court decision. Yeah. This is not going to allow the OK Corral, Dodge City. It doesn't undo the gun restrictions and requirements in the 50 states. It doesn't impact federal gun law at all.
Well, and it's one of those things, right? Where and folks, you got to understand when Jerry and I were talking about what we were going to call the show today, there were many titles that were bandied about as we were thinking about this, because this gets back into the issue of this Boggs case, the Mississippi abortion case, and how the left is blowing this all out of proportion. Oh, and we could talk about the sort of the left trying to create some semblance of hypocrisy between the right to keep and bear arms and the right to abortion. But set that aside for a moment. The point is, and one of the things that I wanted to say today is that, Andrew and Jerry say that the sky is not falling, because this is, though I think Jerry doesn't want people to think that things are complacent. Jerry, I don't want to put words in your mouth, that we all have to be concerned about things. But my point is that in the same way that the left is thinking that if the Boggs decision comes down and Roe v. Wade is completely overturned on Monday, that doesn't mean that nobody can get an abortion anywhere in America on Tuesday morning. It's not what it means at all.
Right. And today it doesn't mean that the state of Maryland or California or New York that have a stricter gun restrictions, somehow those gun laws are thrown out. Andrew, just quickly for the audience, tell them what the decision, the gun decision is.
So the New York state law essentially said that the right to keep and bear arms is really limited to your house, right? That obviously you have to go through whatever New York state gun laws there are to get permits to have a gun, but you have to have that gun in your house. There is no right to actually carry that gun for self-defense outside of your house. Now, with a permit, right? So the New York state created these extraordinary hurdles in order for you to create a means test by which you could get a right to carry permit. And what the decision says is that the presumption should be on giving somebody a permit, right? So you still have to go through the permitting process to get a permit to carry a gun, but you don't have to go through these extraordinary steps. And in fact, it was pointed out in the argument that probably where the New York state lost this case was when their Solicitor General was arguing before the High Court and was asked by, I believe it was Justice Alito. So if I'm a woman and I work late at night and I want to, I live in a dangerous neighborhood and I want to get a firearm for my self-defense, you're telling me that New York State would have to be an extraordinary circumstance before I would be granted that permit. And the Solicitor General said yes. And essentially the High Court said, no, this is not the way it's supposed to be. Remember that fundamentally the Second Amendment is about empowerment. It's about ensuring that people are empowered to act on their own behalf. The High Court essentially affirmed that precept. Go ahead, Jerry.
Well, and two things. Number one, you're right. There have been previous court decisions as well as administrative state and state bureaucratic decisions where the police are not responsible for your personal safety.
Yes.
The courts and legislatures have made this clear. You are responsible for your own personal safety. Here's how I would dumb down, so to speak, the Supreme Court decision.
Sorry, I know I overcomplicated.
No, you didn't at all. But I will say this. The New York State had established a subjective standard.
Yes.
And what the court is saying is you can have restrictions, you can have requirements for licensing to carry, but they have to be objective,
Yes.
something measurable. And the problem with New York, essentially, it let bureaucrats just subjectively decide no, no, no. And there was no way to appeal it because it was based on subjective standards.
And it gets into it's one of those things where, and this is where Maryland is going to run into trouble, because they have this permit review board, which is essentially, it's a labyrinthine process. And I think it's still this way because I'm no longer a Maryland resident.
They actually made it worse because there used to be
that's right.
Repeal. There used to be a
review board.
A review board,
and they got rid of it.
They got rid of it.
Yeah, but so one of the issues was that there was a presupposition in the law in Maryland that you would be not approved, and so in order to be approved, you would be not approved, which is an insane way of looking at things.
And this is exactly what the court says. We can't have these subjective standards. You know, breaking news today, Wall Street Journal piece. The attorneys who just won the case.
I'm glad you're talking about
Kirkland
this,
and Ellis has asked them to step away from the practice.
Well, essentially what happened is, so you have Paul Clement, who is a very celebrated appellate attorney. He was the Solicitor General of the United States and a very good solicitor. Again, exactly the kind of person you want practicing law.
Unless, of course, you're woke progressive and you're caving to the mob.
It goes even worse. It's even worse, Jerry, because Kirkland and Ellis has now they didn't say go. What they said was, we're no longer going to let you practice Second Amendment law.
The day of a victory at the Supreme Court.
Let me be really clear here, right? So there are, listen, I don't know how many decisions in a year. Let's say that there are 20 decisions in a year. There are probably more. But you know, there are a handful of attorneys in America who can say that they've won before the United States Supreme Court.
Yes.
And those people are at the top of their profession. They are at the top of the appellate profession, which is again a small subsection of lawyers in the practicing of law. Paul Clement is at the top of his game. The day that he wins a major victory before the United States Supreme Court, Kirkland and Ellis announces that this is going to happen. Any law firm, I'm sorry, you know something, I was going to say any law firm in the country would and should be happy to have him. Or I think in another time, I would say up until, Jerry, what would you say? 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
3.
Any law firm would be happy to have somebody like this.
You know,
This gets into Cleta Mitchell losing her gig at her law firm. It wasn't also Kirkland and Ellis, was it? Cleta Mitchell was a famous election attorney.
Yeah. I don't remember.
But Cleta Mitchell, who, because she defended Donald Trump and represented Donald Trump, lost her gig at whatever firm it was.
You know, this makes me think this. You and I think, had this discussion the other day, and that is in regard to, I'm taking one step backwards.
I'm sorry, Jerry. It was Foley and Lardner.
I'll take one step backward, take 2 steps forward.
Yeah, please.
So you have this circumstance, the January 6th committee, and they are making these arguments that there was an insurrection, there was a coup. Of course, that's not true. And we've talked about that on this show at length. There was no military cover, political cover, military cover. There was no cover. There was no coup. But even more important than that, if the vice president did refuse to seat certain electors, it wouldn't have made a difference, because those electors would have gone back to the state, and the state, Arizona, Pennsylvania, had already certified the election on December 14th. However, it would have created, and this is where Donald Trump really should be ashamed of himself, it would have created a temporary constitutional crisis.
Sure.
Because the courts would have had to come in and say, there's no remedy here. The law is clear. These electors must be seated. Now, my point is this. In a constitutional republic, it can only function if there are ethical people tethered to the law, right, governing and on the peripheral of the government. The problem with Kirkland and Ellis, and this is it. Yeah, this is my 2 steps forward. If we see legitimate law firms, corporations refusing to support, defend the Constitution, the law. We're in for a mess here because it is a constitutional crisis that legal firms would refuse clients based upon woke politics.
Let me take it in a slightly different perspective. I don't have any problem with law firms picking and choosing who they're going to represent, right? I have a real problem with law firms firing people because essentially this is a constructive termination, right? A term that I've become very familiar with. Essentially creating the conditions whereby somebody can no longer work at their place of employment because they disagree with this person's politics and this person's clients as a result of it. Again, it gets into the issue with Cleta Mitchell. But let's talk. I want to do 30 seconds, Jerry, about history here. Because there has been a battle raging for the more than a generation over legal philosophy within the law. And the left has been steadily for many years trying to get rid of conservative or free market or libertarian perspectives, or those folks who have those perspectives.
On a host of areas, right? Climate change, yes. Right.
From the law. I mean, from practicing the law. So it starts with having very few law schools that admit conservatives. And this is part of the reason why the Federalist Society was created, was to give folks who were admitted to law school a home. And then the Federalist Society became involved in other aspects of promoting conservatives within the practice of law. Now we also see, right, we see Federalist Society chapters being kicked off campus or attempted to be kicked off campus. So this is a whole idea of purging this perspective from the practice of law.
Yeah, Yale Law School, its students have made the argument that conservatives literally. I know, but I do that.
Say literally.
I do that sometimes because
you watch The Office. I get it.
No, also because I had an old buddy of mine who would say that, and I got a kick out of it. So sure. I'm kind of doing that, but that's an inside joke in my own head, which doesn't make any sense.
It's all right.
But anyway, literally, you have Yale Law School pushing out conservative students, and again, yes. One of the premier law schools in the country, yes. Literally saying you're not welcome here, and worse than that. If you are a member of the Federalist Society, if you are a conservative student, you are racist, you yes. are homophobic, you are transphobic, you are misogynist, you are anti-woman, anti-gay, anti-immigrant. And again, why would it, there was a wonderful piece in the Federalist this week that talked about what happens in civil society, in our culture, when the institutions, corporations, the military, right? There's a big news story this week about how the Navy is going woke with pronouns and this transgender nonsense. But eventually, right, people respond and reorganize. Yes. And what's going to happen is that all those families for generations who have supported the military are no longer going to tell their sons and daughters it's a legitimate, honorable thing to do. You're going to have lawyers who might, potential lawyers, instead of practicing law, they'll open up small businesses. My point is that we will reorganize, and these institutions that are going woke are going to be left shallow and without talent.
The problem then becomes, Jerry, because you and I have talked about this, is the slow march of the death of the rule of law in America.
Well, right? Andrew, that's where we're headed.
So when these people do get out of this profession, right, that is it. We essentially, that's where we lose. Because the last bastion we have, right, if Congress isn't going to act and the administration is going to engage in all kinds of chicanery, and then I want to come back to the January 6th thing for a second, Jerry. The only place we seem to be able to win is in the courts. Now, I don't want that, right? That's again, it's the last bastion here,
right?
And too many things can go wrong, right? At some point, Congress, a president decides to expand the court from 9 to 12 or 9 to 13, and all of a sudden, we've got the balance gets tipped and all of this stuff gets undone.
But my point is this.
Yeah.
We are marching toward the end of history because, again, why become an attorney if you can't practice law? Why enter the military if you're forced to abandon your values? And again, I think this is going to impact corporate culture. Look, we're in Pride Month, and everyone has been made to care. Where you have the New York Yankees. Let me take a moment here.
Please take a moment.
I love the Yankees. I mean,
Yes,
drinking out of my Yankee. The New York Yankees are having a Stonewall night at Yankee Stadium. Now, for those who don't know, Stonewall, right, 1969 is day one of the gay movement pushback on unfair discrimination and a legal code that was discriminatory and the rest of it. And you and I can agree that there was legal discrimination against gay people for generations in this country. I just started watching Downton Abbey.
Okay.
And I love it, by the way.
Okay.
I love it.
And you questioned me going out and having couples.
I know. Well, all right, we'll get back to that. But there's a butler who's a jerk, but he's gay, and people don't like him not because he's gay, because he's a jerk. But I told but he has to keep his homosexuality a secret because in 1912 England, he could be arrested and jailed for just being gay. Yeah. So I recognize that there was institutional discrimination against homosexuals, of course. But for Yankee Stadium, when there are 8-year-old boys and girls coming to the game to celebrate Stonewall in particular. Now, here's something we never talk about. Do you know what was going on at Stonewall and why it was raided?
Jerry. Yes.
It was an illicit place where sex workers did their trade.
Yeah.
Now, my point is that here's a movement based upon an uprising at a place where none of us would want our children to be. Yeah. Never mind, 53 years later, celebrating it. We should be able to have a celebration or at least an acknowledgement of past sins without having to be forced into the transgender sex worker ideology. And that's the problem here. There is no pushback on the other side.
I listen, all I know is Billy Martin would have never sat still for this. Billy Martin would have said something.
No,
Steinbrenner would have said something.
But the thing is that eventually I'm going to have to make a decision here. Am I going to spend my dollars on the New York Yankees? It's that's extra. And again, if the Yankees are going to promote something, look, I'm going to go on one last rant here.
Please.
First Things has a very good piece again this week. It's called the Pride Reich.
Yeah.
Okay. And it talks about how the transgender movement, what it's doing with its propaganda in schools and universities and corporations and society broadly, is that there are certain grooves where young people kind of like almost like a pinball machine, where young people kind of find their way to making good choices.
Yes.
And those grooves are parents and schools and mentors and whatever, little platoon, civil society, and it kind of guides young people. Young people will make mistakes, of course they will, but essentially there are guardrails up. There are grooves in our culture to help them become functioning adults. And what we're doing, what the transgender movement is doing, is smoothing out those grooves. Yeah. And so young people have no more. They don't have guardrails.
They're not tethered. Yes.
Yeah. There's no guardrails.
Yeah.
And that's but my point is that that kind of circumstance is going to come to the law, is going to come to other facets of society, and where I think people of faith are going to withdraw and form their own communities and live their lives that way and in happy separation.
And again, and this is the problem, right? You want to talk about how people get radicalized, right? The stovepiping of society. You want people to be able to have discussions with one another about the important issues, what they believe, have these things get openly debated. When you drive those discussions, when you make those discussions impossible to have, that is when you do get resentment. That is when you do get radicalization. And we have to be guarded about this, right? When you have a definition of racism that shifts over time, such that anybody is going to be accused of racism if they say something that is out of the what the left has decided is the norm. That is going to create this kind of alienation and resentment. What you want to be able to do is engage.
You know what I've started to do, Andrew, is, because I have a range of children from 22 down to 8. When I do applications now, I write other.
Yes.
I write. I mean,
well, let's be fair, Jerry. Your kids are Irish German. That does make them other.
But my point is that there's going to be a time when someone who is both brave and genius will claim to be, I am transgendered.
Yes.
And leverage it for political purposes. Then again, that will make the transgender movement reveal it for its
sure. Yes, so in the same way that Leah Thomas, the swimmer, and I don't remember what Leah Thomas's male name was, but that Leah Thomas made a decision that they were transgender and is now able to compete at the top of their game in terms of women's swimming. What you're saying is that someone who was a conservative or a libertarian is going to declare themselves to be trans.
Imagine this, just a fun thought experiment.
And then I want to do a thought experiment,
and we can move on.
January 6th. Yes.
But imagine if a group of 18-year-old athletes angered over the wokeness of the Team USA soccer captain. What's her name?
Megan Rapinoe.
Angry at her comment about, go pound sand. I don't care about your volleyball team, your women's sports. I welcome transgender. Which is,
by the way, an insane perspective from someone who was at the top of her game in women's
exactly
sports.
Right. It's elitism at its worst. Yes. Is what it is. But anyway, imagine if 25 men all try out, or 30 men or 40 men or 50 men at the top of their game, all decide we're transgendered, and they try out for U.S. soccer,
of course,
and displace all those women.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, the gold-winning U.S. women's soccer team has been beaten by high school boys teams,
the 15 and under.
Boys. So
2017.
Don't tell me that biological males invading women's sports doesn't disrupt women's sports.
Or even, and let's be really clear here, even if they were to go down this road of engaging in the hormonal changes, right, taking the hormones to do this, making that transition, they would still have that genetic superiority. This is what Diana Nyad, the long distance swimmer, was talking about, Jerry, 5 years ago.
Lung capacity, bone density.
I want to move away from this for a second, because I want to go back.
I know that was a bit of a rabbit hole. I apologize.
No, it's fine, and I appreciate that. No, but again, I mean, that is something ripped from the headlines. I mean, we didn't even say we were going to talk about Megan Rapinoe, and here we are. But I want to talk about this thought experiment and the law, and coming back to the Foley and the Kirkland and Ellis, but also Cleta Mitchell at Foley and Lardner, because one of the things that I got struck with yesterday, at the same time that one of the Trump lawyers, whose name is now escaping me, was on Tucker Carlson last night, his home got raided yesterday. The former Deputy Attorney General of the United States.
Yes. Clark.
Yeah, Jeff Clark. That's absolutely right. So Jeff Clark got his house raided yesterday, which is disturbing.
And a caveat as you continue. I don't want to.
Yeah, please.
This shows again the polarization of the DOJ, because why is the FBI working in tandem with the January 6th committee?
Well, there's that aspect of it, and it is also, again, there are differences of opinion, and I want to say this much. Because you and I briefly chatted about this yesterday. Let's assume for a moment that the left is fundamentally wrong here, that there was some kind of chicanery going on. Now, we know that there were election laws that certainly had an issue with it. We know there are allegations still out there about ballot box tampering. But let's say that the allegations are not just allegations, that we in fact that Donald Trump was right, that there was a wholesale abuse of the process, and setting aside even that there was not this compressed time frame. I'm sorry, I'm sort of searching here. It's not what I intend to do. My point is, Jerry, let's say that we were going down this road of trying to have an actual investigation into this, and that Donald Trump is still president of the United States until the new president is inaugurated at the end of January. What would you call a Speaker of the House of the opposite party who goes to the Vice President of the United States and demands that the 25th Amendment?
I wish I had a bell, Andrew.
Yes.
Because again, there's so much to unpack that you mentioned leading up to this, but let's just for a second focus on. I
mean, Jerry, I'm asking that question because I wanted to make sure that I was not crazy when I had that thought.
No,
clearly I'm not.
That would be a coup.
Yes, thank you.
That would be an actual insurrection in the sense that there's a conspiracy of leaders wanting to remove a legitimate elected president, and they would have abused the 25th Amendment. And it was not meant. The 25th Amendment is not meant to remove a president with whom you dislike or disagree, with whom you think is off his rocker in terms of his politics. It wasn't meant for that.
No,
it would have been a coup. And again, that shows it's not even hypocrisy anymore, but this hierarchy, this elitist of thinking that it's our way, regardless of the means.
And so all of this talk, by the way, of
I'm so glad you mentioned that,
asking for pardons beforehand.
But by the way, again, they actually named names finally.
Yes.
But no context.
Yes.
And also, 100%. There's a group of congressmen, one in particular, his name escapes. He says, I never asked for a pardon.
Yeah.
So
probably Matt Gaetz, but yeah.
No, it wasn't Gaetz. It was one of the other guys. I'll look for it later. But regardless, they name names with no context. One of the congressmen are saying, this is insane. It never happened.
Yeah.
And then they just with a very anticlimactic thud, they end the hearings.
But this is my point, Jerry. It's almost as though, right, all of this has been a smokescreen to cover up what the Democrats were actually trying to do, right? That in the end,
well, and also look, Time Magazine. You and I talked about this, folks. Trust but verify. Time Magazine several months ago had a piece where they actually said the secret thing out loud, that there was in the 2020 election and the lead up to it, there was a conspiracy, an allied arrangements between law schools and corporations and politicos and state representatives to their term fortify the election, so to guarantee Donald Trump would lose.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, again, the problem with Donald Trump is that he's, what's the word for it? He's a narcissist.
Yes.
And he's not curious about the things.
Time out for a second. Can I crystallize this for you?
Please, because I'm getting frustrated.
I will never forget this. I had a conversation with a colleague of ours in the movement who was an early adopter of Donald Trump, back when you and I were still very much Trump skeptics.
You read that my Facebook post. Remember I sent it to you?
Oh yes,
about Donald Trump. I didn't realize how anti-Trump I was.
Oh yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, and we should find that. But my point is this: that this person said that so you have presidents who are motivated by, they have an ideological philosophy. And we can talk about Donald Trump's, whether or not MAGA, Make America Great Again, America First is a philosophy. I'm sure he believes that. But this person said that Donald Trump just wants to be the best, whatever it is that he's doing. He wants to be the best. That is his goal.
Yes.
And so this is what motivates.
And you and I grew up watching Donald Trump.
Yes.
Right. I mean, this famous New Yorker, he wanted to be the best at real estate, the best at television, the best at casinos.
I will never forget the comic strip Bloom County. The Burke Breathed, the creator of that, was obsessed with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump's narcissism.
Yeah.
And at one point in time, there was a character named Bill the Cat, who was this scraggly stray cat, the ugly as sin, always vomiting. Well, somehow Donald Trump's brain got put into Bill the Cat's body. And it created this whole thing where he wanted to have the best fish heads ever. Yes.
Oh, that's hilarious. But here's the bottom line on this, and that is Donald Trump showed himself to be a person of low character. Yes. He should have immediately called that mob to stop. He did not. He should not have been scheming with John Eastman. And by the way, Eastman's is a scholar and a good guy. I'm acquainted with him, but he must have fallen into the Trump aura of wanting to help his president. The scheme was a scheme. It would never have held up legally. Donald Trump should have gracefully accepted defeat, even though the election was fortified against him. Even though the 2016, I sent to you earlier today a 10-minute clip of all these Democrats and media.
Oh yeah, I'll pull that up in a second. I'll pull that up in a second.
We're talking about how the 2016 election was stolen. So Donald Trump had good reason to be angry in 2020. He had good reason to mistrust the process of what happened in Pennsylvania and other states. But however, a good man would have said, for the best of the country, I'm going to concede, and then I'm going to come back and get you in 2024. So in my mind, the January 6th committee has done one thing that is actually bad for Democrats and progressives and the media, and that is, I think it makes it impossible for Donald Trump to run for president in 2024. I really do. Yeah. And I think that's the worst thing for Democrats.
Listen, I'm always cautious about these things because
think about this.
I'm the person who in August of 2015 said that I had a better chance of becoming president of the United States than Donald Trump.
I get it, but think about this for a second. We know this to be true over the last Trump years, and that is Donald Trump, more than any other figure, maybe in American history since Andrew Jackson, so rallied the other side. Like Republicans, look, it's already done. It's baked in. Republicans are going to win somewhere between 40 and 70 seats in 2022. It is baked in. It's going to happen. Most likely, the Senate will go Republican, maybe by 51, 52 votes. Republicans will control both the House and the Senate in 2022. They will build on those gains in 2024 if Tim Scott, if Kristi Noem, if Ron DeSantis run for office, and we're looking at a real political reshifting. However, if Donald Trump runs in 2024, I think we see more of the same.
I agree.
He might be successful, but I think you'll see moderate Republicans and others break away.
I think there's going to be continued breakage because, Donald Trump broke so many people's brains, regardless of who was the Republican nominee. But this is, hey, just real quick, Jerry, I want to pull this up. So it's for those of you who aren't watching, and sometimes I do encourage you, if you're listening, that's great. It's wonderful. But you can watch us on YouTube and Rumble. I've pulled up this, I think it's 1988 or 1989, Bloom County strip. Can you see this, Jerry? Donald Trump's head on the penguin's body. I want the biggest, tallest, most expensive, glamorous herring head. And then I guess that's is that supposed to be Ivana? Because we were still married to Ivana at the time. Next to him,
or Phyllis Diller. It looks like Phyllis Diller.
I know it looks like Phyllis Diller. And so hold on. And then you were talking about this issue of Democrats. Questioning elections.
While you pull this up, so for our listeners who support President Trump, listen, I understand wholeheartedly why Trump would be angry, feel abused, that he was robbed. I get all that. But at some point, you have to make it look, Andrew and I were fathers, all the mothers and fathers out there. Sometimes you sacrifice yourself because you want to help your children.
Absolutely.
Those who have formed small businesses, you take financial risks and you take and you leverage your life savings for the business, right? Captain Kirk would sacrifice himself for the enterprise.
Yes.
My point is that that's the thing that Donald Trump should have done but didn't do. And if he had done it, in 2020, if he had sacrificed himself to come back and fight another day, we'd be having a totally different conversation now. But instead, he put Trump first.
Yes.
And that was the problem.
But here we go. Here's what Jerry was talking about in terms of the I'm not going to play all 12 minutes, obviously, but here are the Democrats denying election results.
You can run the best campaign. You can even become the nominee.
Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
And you can have the election stolen from you.
Oh, did she
12
say
minutes
that?
of Democrats denying election results.
How can you win with Russian interference, though?
That's the real
what I'm
thing.
scared about in 2020.
But rightly.
Because I think he's an illegitimate
That's
president.
Kamala
that doesn't
Harris.
really win. So how do you fight against that in 2020?
You are absolutely right.
He's an illegitimate president in my mind.
Would you be my vice presidential candidate? Folks, look, I absolutely agree.
Trump didn't actually win the election in 2016.
Jimmy Carter.
He lost the election, and he was put into office because the Russians interfered.
Trump knows he's an illegitimate president.
The president-elect, although legally elected, is
Jerry
not
Nadler.
legitimate.
I don't see this
John Lewis.
president-elect as a legitimate president.
You said you believe that Russia's interference altered the outcome of the election.
I do. We have a president
Dianne
who, if
Feinstein.
in fact it is proven,
This is someone
has
named
been
Marcia
assisted by
Fudge.
the Russians and may
Fudge
in fact
secretary.
not be a legitimate president.
The one thing that Trump
All right.
Hillary
is
Clinton.
fearful of when it comes to his being
No,
president
the
is
point
that
here-
finally we will see how illegitimate his victory actually was.
All right.
I have an objection.
I object
Oh,
to
Jamie
the
Raskin.
state of
Yes.
North Carolina. I object because people are horrified.
He's an illegitimate president.
Do you believe Trump is illegitimate
Debbie
president?
Wasserman.
What I believe is that there's no question that the outcome of this election was affected by the Russian interference.
There absolutely is a cloud of illegitimacy.
Ted Lieu.
That legitimacy is in question.
Raul
Yes.
Grijalva.
That was a very tainted election, and in that sense, it's illegitimate.
Why do you think the president is going to such great lengths to essentially prove that he beat you?
Because he knows he didn't.
There we go. Let's end it there.
But remember this now. The January 6th
Yeah.
committee is prosecuting the FBI is investigating this gentleman you talked about, the former
Jeff
DOJ. His house yesterday was raided, armed FBI agents, and essentially they're being accused of doing what all these Democrats, including Jamie Raskin, by the way, who's on the J6 committee, they all did this. Hillary Clinton hired election law experts and advocacy groups. Nancy Pelosi's daughter ran a campaign to try to convince electors to change their minds.
Right.
So my point is, if all of a sudden this is now insurrection, this is a coup, then we have to go back and prosecute Jerry Nadler, Jamie Raskin,
And let me
and all the rest of them.
let me add something to this, Jerry. Can you imagine if this had been if Barack Obama had not been elected in 2008, but instead was elected in 2012, and it was a Barack Obama versus Donald Trump matchup, and there were these allegations of election interference by the Russians?
Oh, and by the way, Andrew, there were no attempts by the Russians to undo. I mean, not in any other, and not in any different way than they've done for the past 50 years.
The point that I raise is the only thing that sets this election, the 2016 and the 2020 elections apart, is that we didn't have an incumbent president running for re-election. I dare say, given the reaction, right? Given the way that you take this, if you take this at face value, if Barack Obama had been the candidate, one could make the case that the Democrats like Jamie Raskin and Sheila Jackson Lee and others who would question the legitimacy of the Donald Trump election, that they were interfering and that they were engaging in essentially.
Essentially, the J6 committee made the case this week that these congressmen who voted not to seat electors were seeking pardons because they were interfering with an election. They were participating in a coup. Jamie Raskin did the exact no difference. There's no contextual difference. There's no legal. He did the exact same thing, and yet he's now sitting on the J6 committee. I don't understand. This would not be accepted. Imagine if there's a committee, a robust congressional committee, one that's bipartisan, by the way, not like this one, to investigate sexual abuse on campuses,
yeah,
on university campuses. And on that committee sat Ted Kennedy. Yeah. On that committee sat other members of Congress who are known to have abused and sexually, there'd be outrage.
Yes.
Here we have and this is the problem. This is going back to where we started the show. This is why our institutions have been hijacked.
Yeah.
And what bothers me is there are intelligent people. Look, Andrew, today on Twitter, just kind of going through, looking for items, news items for Real Clear and that sort of thing. There's a law professor who writes, someone who has over 200,000 followers on Twitter, saying that the Supreme Court should be dissolved because it doesn't follow the will of the people. Oh, there are U.S. Democratic senators who represent 40 million more Americans than Republican senators, that we have to do away with, essentially do away with the Electoral College, do away with Republican democracy, do away with everything because they don't like the outcome.
So hold on for a second, because this is a perfect segue into our last segment, the segment we call The Bottom Line.
The Bottom Line.
It's interesting you bring that up, Jerry. I am in the process of working on my next essay for the folks at Constituting America, their 90-day study of the Constitution. And in this essay, it's going to be out actually not until July 8th, but I'm working on it now because I got a lot of stuff between now and July 8th. It is about the Communist Manifesto and mentions of class and why there are no class distinctions in the Constitution. That's what we're talking about here. And so I've been going and doing research and trying to pull up writings on this. There aren't actually a lot of writings about this, but one of the writings comes from the American socialists, essentially. And in it, they're talking about the things that would make America less of a classist society. I don't think America is particularly classist, but set that aside for a moment. But one of the things that they talk about is the issue of the disparity between the issue of representational democracy and the United States Senate. Now, keeping in mind, right, that as the founders originally envisioned the Senate was actually supposed to be much, much more responsive to the people, because it was going to be senators were selected out of state legislatures by state legislatures themselves, that it wasn't this sort of elitist place where good bills go to die. You only have to deal with your constituencies but once every 6 years. But the point is that all of these things, that the Senate and the Electoral College are two things that the Socialist Party of America wants to get rid of, and I think that sums it all up there.
Yeah,
but
my daughter's
sorry, go ahead.
No, my daughter's reading a book. I forget the title. I think it's called Nations, and essentially makes the case that America is Look, America is a very diverse country, diversity.
100%.
And in fact, this book makes the case that there would be, if America were to be divided by culture, there essentially would be 11 different nations.
Yes.
And in my mind, that makes the case and why the founders were correct with the Electoral College, because you don't want any one group, one class. You don't want any one culture, one city or cities to dominate the entire country. And the Electoral College protects protects the minority from the majority mob. And why? And the left, and there was a time when the left understood this, but because it no longer suits their purposes, they changed their mind. Here's another thought experiment for you, and I'll be quiet. So we're seeing numbers, and it would be interesting how this turns out, where Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, African Americans are just abandoning the Republican Party. Abandoning the Democratic Party for the Republican Party, or at least they're transitioning, right?
Yes.
So here's the question: what if all of a sudden we get a Republican senator from New York? What if we get in some of these blue or purple states, we see more Republicans elected because of this shift? Will then the Democrats and the progressives change their tune and be like, what if the next election, 2024, what if Ron DeSantis wins 60% of the Hispanic vote in America?
Yeah.
It would be a colossal what's the word for it?
I mean,
Tidal wave election.
Then you would see the retrenchment of their efforts to undo these basic institutions of our republic. Wholesale.
Or would they say, "Oh no, we have to have the electoral college"?
And I say this, Jerry, because we're seeing this right now with regards to the issue of gas prices, right? It's the issue of the denial of reality and trying to make reality bend to their particular will.
Again, we need a ring, we need a bell. You're right.
I do want to shift gears a little bit, because one thing we didn't talk about today was the issue of gas prices and inflation.
I filled my car up. I filled my caravan up, so I was near empty. Yeah, and stopped in. Eric and I were bringing some things to the recycling center, and I said, "Sweetheart, let me stop and get gas." I did, and it was $90.
Jeez.
2 years ago, it would have been $31.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, this is real now.
No, and that's exactly it. And one of the things that I want to talk about is
you heard the announcement, by the way. Joe Biden today was leaked that he is considering a ban on all offshore drilling in America. In the midst of an energy crisis, this president might soon announce all offshore drilling to be banned.
This is the insanity, and this is my point as to why they're just not going to learn. Because it's about this transition. It's about the Great Reset. And it sounds like I'm engaging in conspiracy theorizing.
They say it themselves.
But they've been saying the quiet part out loud. We are transitioning to this other thing at a time, by the way, right? And I put up this meme earlier this week, right? At the same time, they're warning about massive rolling blackouts because of energy demand, electricity demand this summer. They want to have an increase in the draw on the energy supply,
it's insane.
The electricity supply, by making everybody get an electric car. I do want to, but hold on. I want to make sure, I want to caution my conservative friends about the issue of the gas tax holiday. Now, at the beginning of all of this, right, when gas was starting to spike up, I understood and I applauded it, because, I thought that it would be a temporary thing, right? I thought that maybe, just maybe, they would come to their senses and realize, we're doing something. And then, of course, as it drags on, what do I mean by this? What I mean is that the Democrats and the Biden administration would realize the role that the administration's policies were playing in the run-up to gas prices. The problem is, besides the fact that the gas tax, that having an 18-cent a reduction in gas prices isn't going to really help anybody over the long term if you look at the economics of gas, right?
Right, of course.
At the same time, what it will do is it will both drive up demand, because people who had been sort of,
which will do what, Andrew?
Well, hold on. It'll drive up demand because there are people who had been not wanting to take certain trips will in fact take those trips. But it also sends and that will put pressure on the supply. But at the same time, it will also signal to the futures markets that the Biden administration is not serious about increasing supply over the long term.
And it'll do a third thing.
Yes.
It'll do a third thing, which is, if you increase demand, put pressure on supply, at the same time, tell the futures markets that we're not going to change policy, it's going to drive up the price.
Well, that's my point. That's the
We'll say I'm saying the obvious out loud.
Yeah.
It'll drive up the price, which then will lead to what? It will lead the administration and their allies in the media to say, "Look, this has always been about the oil companies.
Yeah,
we just have we have a gas tax holiday,
and they raise
prices going up."
Yes, yes.
And it's funny, because most Americans,
and that's the important point, Jerry. The other important point in this is that it gives them the opportunity to further blame the oil companies. Go ahead.
Exactly. But and again, how I've been amazed, even for me, these last couple 3 weeks, on the absolute ignorance of the American people when it comes to our history, our laws, our Constitution, the Congress, and all the rest of it, but also just basic economics.
Yeah.
Again, this is anecdotal, but my wife belongs to various different groups on Facebook. Our local community has a group, and the moms have a group, and this. So she reads the comments to me, and I'm telling you, it's 9-1. Where soccer moms and these mom groups and these community groups are all blaming capitalism and the oil companies for the spike in gas prices, when it's plain as day that this has to do with policy prescriptions enacted. I read yesterday that there are close to 5,000 leases that this administration won't allow drilling.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: even if all of a sudden they allow for the drilling, it doesn't even matter short term, because where's the capital to go and do the drilling? And then even worse than that, we have a regulatory regime at the EPA that makes it impossible to refine gasoline.
Yeah.
So unless the administration is going to ease up on these policies, and this is what scares me. I don't want the American people to get used to higher gas prices.
Yes.
Get used to not visiting grandma and grandpa, not taking the trip, shutting their air conditioners off.
At a time, hold on, Jerry.
Yeah.
At a time, by the way, it's so funny. At a time when airfare prices are going up and air travel is like the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
I read a piece the other day, a series of travel tips from a flight attendant, and tip number one was, if your trip can be driven, something, let me ask you this before I get to this. At what length is it whereby you have to fly somewhere? You will not drive. What's the maximum time in the car that you will spend where you will fly instead of drive?
I mean, look, I mean, I more than 1,000 miles.
Okay. All right. So
I'm guessing. I mean,
okay, that's
we
perfect.
travel to Florida. I would drive to Florida.
Okay. Got it. So, and that makes sense. That's about the way it is for a lot of people. Yeah. It was one of those things where, and so this woman says that if your trip, like our daughter goes to college 6.5 hours away, right? And so you can either drive or you can fly. And after the last experience that we had where we brought our daughter up for a high school graduation, I told you the story, all right? I mean, my daughter was supposed to fly back because she had a Monday morning class. Her flight was supposed to leave at 7 o'clock in the evening, was going to get her down to Charleston a little after 8 o'clock, or she was going to leave at 8, was going to get her after 9. We got the notification 24 hours in advance. The flight was not just delayed, but substantially delayed. And as it happened, it wound up, if it left at all, it left like something like 5 a.m, which is just,
you're not on probation. You're on super secret probation.
Double secret probation. So, we made the decision to send her on the train, but we were seriously considering the drive here. The point is, this flight attendant said, if your travel time by car is 7 hours or less, you should drive instead of fly. Like, we're going to go up to New York in November. We will most likely drive instead of fly, even though it's,
right.
It's essentially a full day in the car. But that's, I was looking at it at one point when I was looking at airfares, because I'm going to Freedom Fest. For those of you who don't know, I'm going to Freedom Fest in July to do 2 presentations. Freedom Fest is in Las Vegas. And whereas I used to be able to fly to Vegas for maybe $400, $500 at most, it's now going to cost me close to $1,000 to fly there. So I said, something, I'm going to look, I'm going to do the math. Maybe I should drive. It'll be a 2-day drive, but I'll have a car. I'll go. It was going to cost me more to drive than it was to fly, which is also insane. I mean, it is a crazy.
But here's
time.
the thing. Yeah. This is what they want. Fred Smith, again, I mentioned Fred Smith often, our old mentor, president of CEI.
Yes.
He would say things like the progressives or the left, their war is really with modernity.
Yes.
They want us to roll back technology, but not for them. And that's what I mean. It's not hypocrisy, that's hierarchy. They want you to sit in a house in the winter or a hot house in the summer. They want you to not take your family on vacation or visit your parents who might be a long drive away. But for them, again, and this is personalized with our climate czar, Senator Kerry.
Yes.
This is a man who is mega rich, who owns yachts and planes, and he's going around telling the rest of us not to go on vacation, shut the lights off, and conserve.
And it's interesting you say this, because as we were talking about the transition to socialism, and what we're working on. One of the hallmarks of socialism in practice, or communism in practice, right? The stated purpose of Marxism is to get rid of the class distinction. Everybody is equal, from each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. Whereas we all know that the hallmark of socialism in practice has always been the massive schism between the haves and the have-nots, the special privileges that the elite and those who are in power, right? In Soviet Russia, or in any Marxist structure, Maoist structure, Stalinist structure. I'm sorry, what did you say?
Cuba.
I said that the way Kennedy would say it, but North Korea, China, etc., right? China has a social crediting system, which really does, give you privileges based upon your how committed you are to the party. But the point is, in Russia, if you were a member of the party elite, if you towed the party line, you had a car, you had access to special stores, you had access to special apartments, all of those things that would not be available to the
access to better doctors, to better schools,
the proletariat, yes.
to better food, Andrew.
Yeah, no, yes, and this is my point, is that so this is the hallmark, and you're absolutely correct. Listen, let's shift gears a little bit here. We've talked about the bottom line. I want to, because I'm cognizant of the time here. So a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I went to a graduation party and had a lovely, lovely time. We wound up meeting a couple of couples there, parents of kids who were in school with our kids, and we were really taken. And I was like, something.
Oh, Jerry,
I said, Jerry,
I met this guy, and he's
these couples, and we're like,
and you're telling me you're telling me what he does for a living, and he was dressed sharply.
There was one guy. One guy's a banker. The other guy's a urologist.
Oh my goodness!
And the one family is from New Jersey. The other family is from New York. And we were getting along really well with them.
Listen to it. He's getting along really well with the couple.
We're getting along. We're having a great time. These are people I would like to hang out with. And I say to Jerry, these are people I think we can
hang out with them. Why?
Have couple dates with.
Why?
Well, because this is how you make friends, Jerry. This is my point.
Don't you have friends? Don't you have friends?
No, actually, Jerry.
Yes, you do. I'm your buddy.
You're my buddy. You live 3+ hours away, right?
So what?
And so it's a funny thing is I'm telling Jerry.
So you want someone locally to play with, to go to restaurants with?
Yes, I would like to be able to go out and
again,
have
why?
Dinner with another couple, because it's nice to be able to talk about what's going on in the world.
I don't want to talk to some stranger about his job that I don't care about, and where he buys his shoes.
I do care about these things. A stranger is just a friend you haven't met, Jerry.
I'm sorry. It's so weird. It's an odd thing.
It is not an odd thing. I think your perspective on this is very strange. So
I have friends.
So I asked Jerry this. So talk about this, Jerry, because on the one hand, right, you will not go out to dinner with another couple and your wife.
No,
but you will go over and hang out at people's houses with your wife.
Yes, I will. Yes.
Okay. That doesn't seem more swingerish to you than what I'm talking
about.
No,
because it's an occasion. There's kids running around. There's stuff going on. You want to go out like with a couple.
So like tonight,
I don't mind. I don't mind being in a crowd and enjoying other people's company, but I don't want to have an intimate setting with them where we're sharing appetizers and who pays the bill?
Well, okay, that's very easy. There are two ways to do it. Either you say to the waiter, "Hey, we're on separate checks. Us two are together, those two are together."
And by the way, waiters hate that. They hate separate checks.
Well, something, I don't mind that because I tend to overtip waiters. So something.
But what if the other guy doesn't? What if you overtip and he doesn't tip?
That's not on me.
No, you're out with them. You're out with them. You're sharing a meal with them.
That's fine, but
I don't want to have dinner with someone and I don't know how they're going to tip.
I don't know why you would let that wrap yourself around.
Oh, because look, you've been out with me at a restaurant, and I engage with the maitre d', with the staff. I go to Morton's with me. I know everybody, right? So I don't want to go to Morton's with a couple and then the schlep I'm with doesn't tip the waiter.
Okay, but that means you need to know who you're going with. I mean, so
you just met him at a party. So I meet someone at a party, and all of a sudden I'm going to go have dinner with them.
Why? Well, you have to get to know somebody. How do you get to know people?
I don't know. But the thing is, here's the thing: I'm not going to share a meal with someone if I don't know if they're going to tip the waiter well.
No, okay.
I'm telling you how my mind works. Why is that funny? It's the truth.
Awesome.
Look, here's what happens with me. Because there are occasions when I do go out with other people. And you know what I do?
You pay the bill.
I pay the bill.
Well, okay, I've done that before. And that has come, by the way.
And that's what I do is I end up paying the bill all the time. And I don't like doing it. Too.
Sometimes, you say, okay, I'll get this one. You guys get the next one.
Yeah, but what if you don't like them? You don't go to dinner with them again.
Okay, but then you pay the bill and then you never see them again. But the point is,
expensive experiment.
The people we're having dinner with tonight. The wife tends.
Oh my God! You're having dinner with someone tonight?
Yes, we're going out. We're going
on
out
a Friday night.
Yes.
Why do you take your wife out on Friday night?
Well, I am taking my wife out on Friday night. As it happens, I'm also taking my wife out tomorrow night. We got a thing we're going to tomorrow night. Oh, you'll love this.
Roe v. Wade is overturned, Andrew.
It was announced.
Yes, announced. Praise God.
Wow.
Yes.
So it was announced on a Friday.
Goes back to the States. I'm getting updates.
Yeah,
right
I got it here. I've got
that
the
is
opinion.
Good news.
So hold on. I'm pulling up the opinion. I'm going to share it.
Praise the Lord. Praise God. This is good news. This is good.
Right.
This is awesome. Good news. Good for the Republic. Good for the law. Good for our culture.
Well, I mean,
good for unborn children.
Let's make sure that let's read the decision before we before we go and do this.
Wow.
All right. Held. The Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. Roe and Casey are overruled, and the authority to regulate abortion is returned to the people and their elected representatives. Now, let's be really clear about this. What that means is, and hold on, I want to see.
Literally, nothing changes.
It changes insofar as Roe is overturned. Good Lord, it's a huge introduction.
But for California, for Maryland, for New York,
it doesn't change it.
For 23 states, nothing changes.
So it is still Alito delivering the opinion of the court, in which Thomas, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett joined. Roberts did not join. Interesting. Thomas and Kavanaugh filed concurring opinions. Roberts filed an opinion concurring in the judgment. Okay, so he concurs in the judgment, but he wrote a separate opinion. Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan filed the dissent.
So explain to the audience what that means. Roberts.
So what that means is that
concurring in the judgment.
Okay, so when there are arguments that are made by both sides in a case, and a vote is taken, and justices can believe that the arguments are sound, but they can believe for different reasons. So what happens is that this is a 6-3 decision to enforce or uphold the Mississippi law and overturn Roe and Casey. But what it means is that Roberts has different reasons for doing it, which is interesting, Jerry, because this gets into your concept of splitting the baby. That is big stuff here. Wow. Sorry, so you're going. Look, we can't read the whole thing on the air.
This is remarkable. I remember back in the 90s, Eric and I were attending one of. Sorry.
It's all right. You're overwhelmed here. It's fine. Let me. Will you collect yourself for a second?
I remember in the 90s when we were at an event in DC, and there was some discussion that this could be the year Roe v. Wade was to be overturned, and then Sandra Day O'Connor came out and with her decision in Casey. Was it Casey?
Yeah.
I think anyway, but I remember at the time people saying, "Well, that's it. It'll never happen." And I remember thinking that a just nation could not continue with such an unjust decision. And this, in my mind, reaffirms the experiment of America, of the ideals based. This is like Dred Scott being overturned, sure, in my mind. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, it's interesting because I didn't bring it up today, but there was a really galling. In fact, I'll pull it up now. There was a really galling piece in The Nation yesterday or the day before by a writer named Sophie Lewis, who I'm pulling up her Twitter feed, in which she said outright hold on. She said outright that abortion is killing and that women should embrace that.
Yeah.
Which is
there's been all kinds of social media posts.
The Nation, the headline of it. This is really a piece that was written in the Nation 2 days ago.
Wow.
Abortion involves killing, and that's okay. To be pro-choice is to be against forced life. But let me. But
again, think about the intellectual dishonesty there, because no one is forcing anyone to procreate.
Well,
no
one's
forcing anyone to have unprotected sex. And again, look, the problem here too, and this has to do with the same-sex marriage debate. And again, I'll clarify. You and I have said this 1,000 times. That, you know, if you want to organize your life and have a same-sex relationship and partnership, intimate partnership for life, that's your business. But that being said, when we untether marriage from childbearing, we've done damage to our culture. And I understand there are all different types of couples, older couples, and couples that are not fertile. But the fact of the matter is, for 2,000 years, the idea of marriage was you get married and you have a family, and we untethered that, and it has caused all kinds of social problems in our country. I mean, again, we didn't touch on it today. We have a violent crime epidemic in America, and the number one cause of it is fatherless homes, and yet we don't even talk about
number one sort of variable that is attached to this. And yet folks won't do this. I took off the sharing of the decision because we can't read it on the air, and
sure.
Only a couple minutes left in the show. I'm doing square off after this, so we'll assume that this is going to be a topic of conversation on it. But I don't know. I would be very curious to see how this opinion differs from the draft opinion. Clearly somebody is going to be reading furiously right now and over the next few minutes to do that. I need to go and take a couple minutes and look at what Justice Roberts had to say. And then one asks the question, right, Jerry, with this decision today, what is the response going to be from the White House? What is the response going to be from the Justice Department, right? And one wouldn't normally ask that question.
And will the DOJ, will Homeland Security, will the White House pre-condemn violence? Because the left has been clear that they will commit violence. Now, will the authorities protect our institutions? Will the Supreme Court be protected? Will the justices be protected? Will their homes be protected? Will the pregnancy crisis centers and other pro-life organizations around the country be protected? And this is a real test for this White House. Unfortunately, I think they will fail.
Well, I know, and I agree with you there. But I'm also talking about, yesterday's unprecedented statement from the Justice Department condemning the Supreme Court's decision on gun rights.
And again, unprecedented.
Yes.
The DOJ condemned, and by doing so, they undermine the authority of the court. That was purposeful.
Exactly.
This DOJ, this administration, progressives in the media and in corporations and in academia and Hollywood, they want to, in the name of supporting institutions, what they're really doing is undermining institutions. And frankly, they're doing exactly what the J6 committee accuses the Trump folks of doing. They are trying to undermine democracy.
And let's be really clear here. And I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, Jerry, because I don't claim to be an expert on abortion law, and I certainly don't claim to be an expert on Mississippi abortion law. But Mississippi still allows for abortion. It just has to be before 15 weeks, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
And by the way, recently there was a political leader. Oh, it was Nancy Pelosi.
Yes.
Nancy Pelosi was asked to condemn the violence, the attempted assassination on Brett Kavanaugh. She refused to condemn violence and refused to condemn the assassination attempt, which again, that's an easy lift, and she refused to do it. But she made the case. She said, look, she said, this is uniquely American. and I'm paraphrasing because I'm more articulate than Nancy Pelosi, but she said this anti-abortion movement is uniquely American. In Europe, they don't have this. And I wanted to, wait, this report, there's a whole bunch of reporters in the room. A reporter could have asked her, well, then, Ms. Pelosi, would you support a European style regulation of abortion in America? Because guess what? In the EU, abortion's cut off at 15 weeks.
Well, it depends on the country. Let's be really clear.
But for the most, but how many countries on the EU? In the EU? 22, whatever the number is. There are outliers, but for the most part, if I had to make a general statement, the cutoff in Europe is 15 weeks. And so if in America, if the pro-choice movement wants to compromise at 15 weeks, I think most Americans would accept that.
Yeah, here I want to I was going to pull up here we go. This is it. God, the EU laws about cookies are so labyrinthine. Here we go. This is good. All right, that's.
I wonder if Facebook's going to allow me a little pro-life. Those little frames they do. Do I get?
Yeah.
No, they won't, of course.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll pull it up later. I'm not gonna. I don't need to pull it up now. Listen, because we do have to get out of here. I do want to turn our attention.
Now, look, just one thing, Andrew. I know we got to go, but
no, I got one more question.
I have a meeting. I have a meeting in DC today near the Supreme Court. Now, I'm wondering, do I still take the meeting? Right?
I would be reluctant to do that.
Yeah. Right. And how sad is that? How sad is that?
Right.
That I have to now maybe reconsider my client meeting today because it's we're going to be at the Capitol Hill Club, which is not far from the Supreme Court.
Well, listen, I think if you're at the Capitol Hill Club, I think you'll be fine there. I mean, that's.
What if it was day of rage, block all the streets?
Sure, but this is, you can always take the Metro, Jerry.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What am
I taking the Metro?
I want to end on a, well, listen,
I'm joking. I love the Metro.
On a happy note. But I do want to get your thoughts about this. So the Elvis movie, the Baz Luhrmann Elvis movie
I haven't seen it yet, of course.
I know you haven't, but this is why I want to get your thoughts on this. I'm actually shocked at the reviews.
Look, the reviews range from it's parody, to I mean, that's it. I mean, it's over the top parody. But remember, this director, he was the director of other movies, Gatsby, and he's been accused of vamping it up, of overdoing
that's
it.
what he does. That's his
thing. But here's the thing: the family responded differently.
Yeah,
Elvis's family, Priscilla, and Lisa Marie, and his granddaughter and others have liked the movie.
Well,
so my guess is this: if you are not an Elvis fan, if you don't know Elvis and his remarkable lasting influence on our culture, you might go into this and think it's Liberace.
So I have a theory, by the way, and I'll get into this in a second. And I will say this: I'm not a Baz Luhrmann fan.
No, neither am I. I agree.
Didn't particularly like Romeo and Juliet. Didn't particularly like
Gatsby was horrible.
Didn't like Gatsby.
Yeah.
I was also not a fan of the 1973 Gatsby with Robert Redford and Bruce Dern. And then also didn't like Moulin Rouge.
Yes.
So, but this is his thing. I have a theory though. Now you and I have had this discussion. There's the famous line in Public Enemy's Welcome to the Terror Dome, where Chuck D says, Elvis was a hero to most, but he never meant S to me. You see how straight up racist that sucker was, simple and plain. Mother F him and John Wayne. And you and I've had this discussion where you have very passionately and rightly defended Elvis as not being a racist, being the opposite.
Elvis, let me make my point very clear.
Please.
Elvis Presley, in terms of the civil rights movement, is as important as Jackie Robinson.
There you go. Okay. See, and my point is that Elvis being the important place that Elvis took, or the important I'm not going to say role, but the important outlook that Elvis took in terms of race relations in the 1950s and the 1960s, that is portrayed in this movie. And I suspect that some corners of the left are not happy about the resurrection of Elvis as being actually not just racist, but anti-racist, not just.
Yeah, but look, you know what kind of Elvis fan I am.
I know you are.
I mean,
in fact, guys, real quick, so you understand, part of how Jerry and I bonded, part of the reason why Jerry and I bonded back in 1999, when Jerry first hired me, is that we had a conversation about Elvis, and I was able to talk about Elvis's eating habits, and Jerry appreciated that.
Yes. And anyway, I know Elvis well. I know his history well. Elvis did much behind the scenes in terms of local civil rights issues, in terms of helping Black businesses and Black families, but also more than that, just like Jackie Robinson made it difficult to hate Black baseball players because, look, they can play just like us.
Yes.
Elvis Presley did not rip off the blues players or the soul players or the gospel players. In fact, what he did was he mainstreamed this music. And the reason why we know about Muddy Waters today, or the reason why we know about a lot of these early 1940s gospel and even Aretha Franklin, for crying out loud, go back and listen to. There's a podcast, The History of Rock and Roll, and it talks about these 1930s and 40s, these African American brilliance in music. Yeah. Elvis Presley brought that to popular culture at a time when African Americans were segregated and couldn't go to school and couldn't do things. Elvis Presley brought Black culture to the forefront.
Yes.
Tell me that didn't
100%.
Anticipate
without the exposure of this music to millions of white American teens around the country, you would not have had the exposure of actual Black music to these teens. The love of that.
And let me say this also, because remember, Elvis's early performances were much. Look, Elvis in the 1970s much different than Elvis in the 1950s.
Sure,
Elvis was raw. Elvis Presley was so raw that literally he influenced the Beatles.
Yes,
Led Zeppelin doesn't happen. The Beatles don't happen, but for Elvis Presley.
Yes.
But however, remember this too. No one knew what he looked like.
Yes,
everyone assumed that he was that he was Black, that he was African American.
Yes,
so they loved what he was doing, and didn't know that he was a white guy. And then all of a sudden, he's a white guy and he's playing Black music. Then all of a sudden, you have Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin. You have Sir McCarthy from the Beatles. Now going back and listening to Black music.
You have Steve Marriott from Humble Pie.
But the point is, Robert Plant's whole world opened up to this Black gospel, Black soul music,
right? And the other side of it, right, which is where it's Carl Perkins who was African American, right?
No, Carl Perkins was
there's a rock and roller who everybody thought was white, and turns out he was Black.
Elvis. Oh no, it was the other way around.
Yes.
I don't know.
Sorry. And sort of hitting. No, it's who did Johnny Be Good?
Chuck Berry.
Chuck Berry.
Yeah.
So people thought Chuck Berry was white. And he would show up to play at venues, and then they would realize he was Black.
Who's this guy?
Yes. And so, but again, no Elvis, no Chuck Berry. I mean, that's sort of the point here.
Look,
hey, Jerry,
America was moving down towards the civil rights movement anyway. The heroes of the civil rights movement in this country, and that's why, by the way, I like that we have Juneteenth as a federal holiday now, because the civil rights movement is one of victory, not victimhood. Elvis Presley, like Jackie Robinson, moved our culture toward equal rights.
I agree with that. Hey, Jerry, I'm actually going to take a bit of personal privilege here. I'm going to change the title of the episode.
Do it.
Andrew and Jerry Save the American Supreme Court. Andrew and Jerry, we've already done Andrew and Jerry Save the Supreme Court. Andrew and Jerry Save Supreme Court Decision Making, Supreme Court Review, something to that effect. Catching you on the spot here.
Andrew and Jerry
say, God save the Supreme Court.
Kick out Roe v. Wade.
No, wait. Don't have to do that because we were talking about other stuff too.
I know.
I think it's going to be Andrew and Jerry say, God save the Supreme Court.
Yes.
All right, cool. All right, listen, Jerry. So I am on for I'm in with Larry O'Connor on O'Connor and Company on Wednesday and Thursday of the coming week, the 29th and 30th. Excellent. You're doing some fill-in stints this week.
Yeah, well, on Sunday, it's the Jerry Rogers Show on WBAL, but then on the Thursday, the 30th, I'm going to do a special Jerry Rogers edition of the show Thursday night at WBAL, and then the following Wednesday, I'm doing a special edition Jerry Rogers Show at WBAL. Now, the neat thing, Andrew, is that these are now Jerry Rogers shows at night. Because I'm not filling in for anyone.
That's right.
And so therefore, the tenor of the show, the personality of the show, it's the Jerry Rogers Show, just brought to you in the evening.
Nice. I like that. So Jerry, what do you want people to do?
Oh my goodness.
Now more than ever.
Find the truth, plant your feet, stand firm. God bless you.
And guys, as I always say, especially on a day like today, have a great week, have fun, and stay safe.